Welcome to AP Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Al Pilong, CEO of AP Leadership Partners, an executive coaching practice centered around a passion for effective leadership. There are two things I know for sure about leadership. First, leadership is hard. And second, leadership matters. And so my hope today is that through the course of this conversation, you will find fresh ideas and inspiration for your challenging but important leadership journey ahead. Thanks for listening. The AP Leadership Podcast is sponsored by CXO Coaching, an executive coaching firm focused on empowering leaders and driving results. And now, let's get started. In today's episode, we will be talking about our favorite leadership quotes and books, as well as how we navigate transparency and vulnerability and hard decisions as a leader and with our teams. And to do that, I'm really pleased to welcome Laura Glenn to the show. Laura is the Chief Operating Officer at Munson Healthcare and is responsible for advancing Munson's strategic plan to be a national leader in the delivery of rural healthcare. I love Munson's purpose statement, which I saw this morning on social media. We improve lives. And Laura is right at the center of fulfilling that purpose for Munson. She has responsibility for 7 hospitals, over 100 ambulatory facilities, home care, digital health strategy, and advancing population health strategies. Prior to joining Munson in 2017, Laura served as a senior vice president and executive director of Beaumont Health Physician Partners. I think one of the more interesting things about Laura's background is she started at Beaumont as an administrative intern in 2004. And for those of you who are listening who might be early in your career, Laura is a tremendous example of what hard work and perseverance over time can do as she has risen through the ranks of leadership to the highest levels. So Laura received her master's in health services from the University of Michigan and her bachelor's in health fitness from Central Michigan University. Laura, it's great to have you on. I know we overlapped at Munson for a couple of years as colleagues, and so it's really good to be back with you. Before we get into the substance of our conversation, maybe you could share a little bit more about your background.
All right. Well, thanks, Al, for having me and for that wonderful introduction. So you did remind everyone that I've been in healthcare now for 20 years. So, as you mentioned, I did start as an administrative fellow. I, from that point, took a long and winding journey across many areas within healthcare. So I had roles on the hospital side of things, running surgical services in a really busy place, which was a learning experience in and of itself. Also had roles on the physician side of the delivery system. And it really has been an adventure. That's how I like to look at it. And I've been just so fortunate to have tremendous opportunities to work with and learn from really great leaders, yourself included, Al, so I put you in that category.
Thank you.
Just on a personal level, so I've been married for 20 years. I have 2 daughters. They're both teenagers. There's a lot of, corollaries between experiences at work and raising teenagers. Also have 3 dogs. We have 3 Bernedoodles, so clearly we love animals. And, I talk a lot with my team about having interests outside of work and having ways to kind of process and manage your stress. And I do that through running. And in my 40s, I got into marathoning, so a little bit later than others, but I've run 6 marathons. I'm currently on a quest to run the original 6 world major marathons. I've done 4 of the 6. And
Wonderful.
so
Wow.
next up for me is Chicago in the fall. That will be number 5. So that's just a little bit about what I do outside of work.
Not that you're not busy enough at the job, you're now training to be a world-class marathon runner.
I don't know about world-class, but
Well, it's really good to be with you. I enjoyed our short 2-year overlap at Munson, and I've really enjoyed watching you from afar as you've continued to excel in leadership. Let's start with your favorite book on leadership and why.
Probably my most impactful book was Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. So those of you who are familiar, Sheryl Sandberg was the Chief Operating Officer of Facebook Meta. And she released it in 2013. Also, when I looked back, that made me feel a little old. But I read that earlier in my career and right when it came out. And at the time, I was in my early 30s. I had 2 really young children. My husband was working full-time in a busy job, and I had just become a vice president at a $2 billion health system. life was very full and I was struggling to kind of keep all the balls in the air. And pretty much everyone I worked with wonderful people. But when I looked around the table, everyone was about the age of my father. All had grown kids and wives that stayed at home. And so I was the one that kind of didn't fit into that picture. And so I was just in a different stage of my life. And so I had different challenges that some of my both coworkers and superiors didn't really understand. And I didn't have a great example of how to balance that and how to think about being a young female professional. And so I would say that the book really spoke to me on a very personal level and really helped me realize that, while I might have felt alone in my workplace, I was not alone in the universe of young female leaders. And so there were some really key lessons that I took away from that book. And they're lessons that I now value and appreciate mentoring other young female leaders, because I watch young moms who have career aspirations and are trying to manage a family struggle with many of the same things. And some of the key lessons that still resonate with me and that I try to pass along to the next generation is about taking a seat at the table and having a voice. And I've watched young leaders, male or female, kind of end up being the note taker in a meeting as opposed to being an active participant. And so that's something that's a trap that you can fall in. And it made me be conscious of how I showed up and how I participated and engaged around the table. And also, there's a lot in there about setting boundaries, work boundaries, and a lot of young leaders struggle with that. And it takes some maturity, professional maturity, to set appropriate boundaries. And then there's a lot in that book about your home support structure, having very intentional conversations with your spouse and a plan for the home duties, because your job doesn't stop, moms and dads, when you leave work, right? You have a whole nother
that's a
job
fact.
to go home to. And how you manage that can impact in a very positive way the time and energy you're able to give to your career as well. So lots of lessons for me from early in my career that, again, I continue to hopefully pass on to the next generation of leaders struggling kind of with the same things.
Yeah, those three things are really powerful. Having a voice, love that. And what it also reminds me of is the importance as you grow as senior leaders to listen to the voices of those who are a little less far along, a little less gray hair, because the wisdom that comes from every generation is critically important, and the diversity of our teams is what makes us what we are. And so having a voice, that's a great encouragement for young leaders, but for more senior leaders, allowing that voice to be heard. Yeah,
Exactly.
That's really,
yes. And encouraging it, because I think sometimes when you're early in your career, you feel a little bit more timid or reserved about offering and speaking. So we're trying to kind of draw that out from more inexperienced leaders, because you need those perspectives, and sometimes you have to help them feel confident to bring their voice to the table.
Yeah, for sure. I love boundaries. One of the epidemics in the work world today is burnout. And so the fact that you had that sort of aha moment through that book early to set boundaries, I'm sure has served you well and continues probably to serve you well as you're now raising teenagers that have lots of other issues that you're navigating on the home front.
Who need boundaries. Teenagers
Yes.
need boundaries. Right?
But you're also showing up on the home front as well. And so whether you're a single mom or a single dad or a blended family or a married couple, our responsibilities at home are ongoing, and figuring out how to navigating them, that's really good. So thanks for sharing that. All right, let's talk about leadership quotes. Do you have a favorite one you want to share?
The one I selected is by Winston Churchill. My favorite is, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." The reason I picked that and why I think it's so important for leaders is that I watch leaders and organizations have this very deep fear of failure. And I would say it holds people and teams back from trying new things.
Yeah.
Speaking from a healthcare industry perspective, the industry is facing so many challenges that we need to become more innovative, get better at failing. You can kind of rest on your laurels from past success. That's not going to get you very far in this rapidly changing environment. So we've got to be more comfortable failing, helping our leaders understand that it's okay to fail. You also have to own it and sometimes fail fast and move on. Learning how to build that muscle within your organization is really important. Just try things, fail, and then have the courage to pick up and move on, because one failure doesn't define you. So we've had a lot of discussion about how do you create a safe environment for people and leaders to try things and to fail and then to move on. And I would say it's not easy, but I think it's going to be so important moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And that comes also with a responsibility for senior leaders to create an environment where it's okay to fail, to encourage risk taking, and that's really how innovation occurs, right? You know, you think about great inventors and how many times they failed before they got it right. You're sharing that quote reminded me of a saying, I'm not sure who I should attribute it to, but it's what got us here won't get us there. In healthcare, in whatever industry, we get very comfortable with the way we do things, the things that we do that have worked in the past, but we all know that the world is changing at a pace that we've never seen before. So great inspirational quote. Churchill obviously is one of the great leaders in difficult, dark times that had the backbone to do something singular that most people would not have the courage to do. I'm curious how you have worked to create the environment for innovation, for failure, and making that okay.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say we're still working on it, because it's all about that environment, as you said, and having a safe environment. I think part of it is also, you know, as a leader, sharing your failures with your team, I think goes a long way. Because I know there's members of our broader leadership team, you know, that assume that I'm in the role that I'm in because I've never failed. That couldn't be farther from the truth. We all have our stories of failure. We took a group of our team on a site visit. We went to Intermountain Health. What was great is our team that went there saw that culture and we're like, let's be really intentional about how we create that here. And being really open and transparent and honest about having it be a learning opportunity when there is a failure, as opposed to having it be, you know, someone feeling that they're being blamed for something not going well. Some ideas just don't work and it's nobody's fault. Let's move forward and learn something from it.
I applaud you for that, and just really working to create an environment, a culture where the behavior of risk-taking is not penalized but rewarded. So good stuff. All right. So as a leader, you mentioned this a little bit in your last answer. How do you navigate the appropriate level of transparency and vulnerability with your team when you're struggling with a decision or a personal issue? You know, we talk about failure, whatever it is that is the hard things, because as a leader, right, we're always feeling like we have to present ourselves well. We have to exude confidence. We have to have all the answers, et cetera. But I think we both know that's really not true. Talk to me about transparency and vulnerability.
Yeah. And, I would say this is something that I talk a lot to my senior leaders about, and I think that within our organization, most of our leaders show up as real human beings, and being real and showing vulnerability is so important to be able to, first of all, bring your full self to work, and second of all, just be relatable to the rest of the organization. And so I speak very openly to my team about decisions that I'm struggling with in a way to get their input and perspective and try to create a safe environment that this is open discussion. Kind of goes back to the risk taking, and some leaders feel, gosh, there's going to be a penalty or something bad that happens if I make the wrong decision. And sometimes there isn't a right or wrong decision. They're complicated decisions, right? And so being able to be open about that is incredibly important. And you made that comment of like, we feel like we need to have all the answers. We don't. We actually shouldn't have all the answers, right?
That's right.
We need to help bring the right people around the table so we can have the right voices so that we can come to the collective right decisions. And we need to know what we don't know. And I do see leaders fall into that trap of thinking they need to have all the answers and not admitting, hey, I need help, or I need some input, or I need more voices because I'm struggling with this decision. It's so important to humble yourself, to be able to recognize when you need some input, when you need some counsel or advice on difficult decisions, because we face a lot of difficult decisions on a daily basis.
Yeah, and you have to be comfortable enough in your own skin to admit where you think you have an idea, you're not really sure, to admit that you don't know, because that's why you have a team. You have
Right.
experts around your table on your team. And it goes back to that voice that you were talking about early in your career, creating an environment where everyone's voice, everyone's expertise can be brought to bear so you get to the best decision. That takes security as a leader.
And it takes creating that safe environment.
Yeah.
I would say I think that's something that our organization does pretty well.
Yeah.
I appreciate that because it means we can have very open, honest conversation.
How did you come up about a safe environment like that created the context for those kind of conversations?
I think first and foremost, like senior leaders kind of set the stage for, what behavior is acceptable. Some of it comes from, our CEO, Ed Ness. I think he sets that expectation that he wants to have everyone's perspective heard, and he creates that safe environment. I would say I attempt to, to emulate that and do the same with my leadership team. And there's just a leadership culture here that is highly collaborative. And so we hire to that culture. And I think, the time you spent here, Al, I would say you contributed to kind of helping to continue to build that. And so we've tried to be intentional, don't always get it right, but try to be intentional about hiring leaders who are going to fit well with that leadership culture.
Yeah.
It's about the team. And it's about supporting each other. And some of that is also based on personal relationships. Our team does a good job of getting to know each other as humans and supporting each other. That's where I think some of the transparency and vulnerability comes into play, because we always say you have kind of a work bubble and you have a home bubble. And there's some times when you need to have some grace from your work colleagues because things at home are challenging, and everyone goes through that, right? And I think it's important to again, bringing your authentic, real self to work, to just tell people that you're having struggles at home. I will say that having two teenagers, I definitely would say that I live in a glass house, and the last thing I'm ever going to do is to judge a parent of teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I can appreciate how hard it is. But I talk a lot about, and even with our broader leadership group, we've done a couple of panels with different senior leaders, just talking about making ourselves human, that there's some challenges. You deal with challenges in your personal life, and how do you juggle that with a really responsible job? I've talked very openly about what I do to take care of myself so that I can bring my best self to work as well. Because I do think that a lot of leaders, they feel like they have the weight of the world on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And I couldn't possibly take time to go to the gym or go take a walk because I've got all this going on at work, and then I have all this going on at home. And you just watch people fall into the trap of not taking care of themselves. I've talked a lot about like how I use running to kind of it helps me manage the stress of my job. And it's a lot of mental processing time. So I make time for that because I could I spend that extra hour at work? I'm sure I could.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's always stuff to do. But I think it's that level of being real with your team, because they need to understand that our expectation is not that they're 24/7 on the job. We know they have a family. We know they have struggles. It's never easy. There's always challenges. We want them to take care of themselves so that they can bring their best selves to work. So living by example and just being open about how I do that, how other members of our team do that, I think also makes us real people. And I think that's important. Again, it kind of builds that trusting, safe environment, and it helps build relationships among the team.
Yeah, and as you are describing that environment and talking about how to manage things, manage stress, manage workload, have balance, that trickles down throughout the organization. When a senior leadership team is competitive, is backbiting, is, led by ego, everybody in the organization knows it. And, the same is also true when the team has good vibes, has good communication, has good, leadership where people work as colleagues and, you really respect everyone around the table. That also trickles down throughout the organization. And you're leading an example for everyone in the organization, for all your leaders and for all your frontline staff on, what this is supposed to look like. And so that's powerful. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks for continuing that there at Munson. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's wrap up here with closing thought that you might have for our audience.
All right. Well, so early in my career, one of the CEOs that I worked for, he was the CEO of Beaumont Royal Oak Hospital, John Labriola. I'll never forget John. He told me, he said, What we get to do every day is a privilege. Never forget that. And I would say I never have forgotten that. And I know that there's days where our jobs feel really, really heavy and they're stressful. But at the end of the day, that perspective of how what we get to do every day is a privilege, it reframes things for me. And it reminds me that, yes, our jobs can be heavy, but we're entrusted with the community's health and the community's health care. And that's really special. It's something that we should feel fortunate to be privileged to do. It's something that on the tough days, I like to remind myself what a privilege it is, and it helps me frame the challenges or the problems of the day, to be able to be more grateful for the opportunity as opposed to feeling the burden sometimes that we feel in our jobs.
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective. I remember even when I was at Munson and other places, I always would go to new employee orientation and speak to the new employees. And I mean, I literally said the exact same thing to every employee. I said, we get to come alongside people in some of their most difficult and challenging circumstances in life and make a difference. And it's a privilege that we get to do that. And so that is one of the beautiful things about being in healthcare. And there's a lot of other industries where the service component is powerful, but the privilege of leadership in healthcare, privilege of serving in healthcare is unmatched. And so what a great a final thought to leave with the audience. So thanks. Laura, it's been really good having you on. It's great to reconnect. I just love everything that you're talking about, the work that's going on at Munson, and just wish you all the best as we go forward.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Leadership is rarely simple and it's rarely easy. And that's exactly why it matters. My hope is that something from today's conversation gave you a moment to pause, reflect, or see your leadership in a new way. Until next time, lead well.